Hello, cousins. Welcome to SASS Mass, our spirituality and support symposium. Think morning witchy chats around a warm campfire. The recording has started, and by participating in SASS, you agree to read and accept the terms of engagement, which I'll post in the chat. We ask that you mute during the recording for clarity during the meeting and for the afterplay. We will now get started with a few announcements.
Hey, witches. I see a couple of new people here. So I'm Maria. Um, I'm on the support team, and I'm usually the one posting with the bright and dark account on the heartbeat. I may not always be that person, but I'm usually that person. So you just can put a face to a name. So hello for those of you in the app space. Ocean, I think you're still sharing, or maybe you're not. Maybe my screen is just. Let me change my view. I can't see everybody. Yay! I just changed to gallery view in case that was something somebody else needed. So hello everybody. So we um just got back from our autumnal convergence, and that is open to members of foundations or the guild. And so we had a great group this year, and the autumnal convergence is in person. We do it every year, and if that's something someone would like more info about, hit us up. We love to talk to you about it. Um, we've been doing it in Oregon. Um, yes, we plan on having more in-person stuff, and that's something that we'll be talking about throughout the year. And so, yeah, we have a feedback section in the app. It's for the app itself, but there's also places for like suggestions and content suggestions. So if like you have suggestions about those kinds of things, feel free to post it. And we do read everything. Um, and we also yeah, make a lot of changes from the feedback. So keep sharing that. So with that, all that said, we're still kind of getting acclimated back into um, our respective areas of the world now that we are all home, back home. And yeah, we'll start. We have some like really big projects in the works, some like short term and some long term stuff. And so we're like ready to get back to it and excited about that. So, as we kind of roll things out, we'll be sharing with you all. We hope to be adding some workshops, um, and um, we've had virtual retreats, and then again, doing the autumnal convergence. Again, we'll start planning for the 2025. So lots of exciting things going on. The app space is also like fairly new. I feel like kind of just doing a little more of an intro because this is the first SASS that we opened up again to like the public, but it's a little bit different because it's really for everyone that's joined us in the app space, which is our courtyard space and our public space. Um, Back when SASS Mass first started, we used to kind of post it and have it publicly. And then we shifted to more of a member meeting because that felt more aligned with a lot of the conversations that we were having. But now that we have this awesome app available to us, it felt aligned to open it back up again. So on the first Sunday every month, we have this space now open for anybody that wants to join and for anyone listening to the afterplay. This has become one of the favorite, I think, meetings of a lot of members of Bright and Dark and people that have joined us over the 3 years that we've been doing this. And the reason is because it's super casual. There's no agenda. We don't discuss what we're discussing in advance. It's whatever is on your minds about witchcraft and like general shadow work kind of questions. Um, in Foundations program, we do have a meeting called Sacred Space where we kind of go deeper into the shadow work. But for this type of event for SASS, we kind of have more of those um, general discussions and talk about like what our perspectives are. And so we're kind of all meeting like as peers to chat and to share. And it is posted, so you can always go back and listen to the replay to SASS Mass on our YouTube channel. And that is a public, the meetings are posted publicly. So you are welcome, as Ocean mentioned, you're welcome to stay on or off camera. You can change your name if you want to stay private. Um, so that option is always there. And you're always welcome to just come and observe. We know that sometimes it's like, well, what are you doing here? And I don't know what's going on. And maybe you're feeling a little bit nervous. And so you want to just kind of come and check out these witches and see what they're up to. And that's totally cool too. You can just come and lurk. We love lurkers. We welcome you to just do your thing that way. So yeah, that feels good to wrap up announcements. Foundations members and guild members, our meetings are all posted in the events. Everything is, all the things happening for October, kind of as usual. And yeah, we'll just continue to keep you posted with any new stuff. And happy October. Thanks. Ta-da.
Hi everyone. This is my first SAS in Dexter, my RV. So I'm still kind of figuring out where I'm going to be sassing and camera angles and all of that. Work in progress. It's great. Man, so much has happened already today that like usually what I'll do before SAS is kind of like feel into how the live went and feel into like if there is a common kind of feeling signature or whatever, and I kind of riff off of that. But I'm still in this position of like reorienting in a lot of ways. And at the same time, we're going into a season where the veil is thinning. And things get louder in my experience. And so it's just like I'm still in this process of like translating everything that's coming through. And one thing, if I could pick like a common thread or whatever for today, and if we riff off of the live that we did this morning, that like calling us out on how today is ripe for really looking at what you've accomplished, your successes over the course of this last like year. What are your successes? What have you accomplished? What are your like little wins, little tools that you've kind of created for yourself over the course of this last year? And that kind of reflection really does help us in that, like when you're reorienting yourself and you're going into what we talk about a lot, like the inward turn. A lot of us, witches are connected to the changing of the seasons, whether we are aware, consciously aware that that's what's going on or not. We are we're a part of what's going on all around us, and a lot of us are very sensitive to that. And as seasonal creatures, there is a time for introspection. And it's one of the lessons that I learned a lot from. It's a lesson of the trees, right? The trees teach us that there are times that we do this inward turn so that we can learn from the last year, so that we know how to grow better next year, so that we can fortify ourselves in some way. And we're heading into that inward turn right now. And for me, it's very tidy because of this, like I'm reorienting my everything right now and heading right into this inward turn where I'm in this deeply reflective state of, what did I learn over the course of the last year, and what can I do better next year? What's coming through this very thin veil as far as how to make adjustments and pivots in my practice to create more expansion and alignment, right? So I've been thinking about that kind of stuff a lot as well. Can anyone else relate? Yeah. And I still have the wah-wahs from the convergence and being around so many witches for so long. We worked some like very deep and powerful magic together, and that it has influence on our systems, and I'm feeling that too. Changing my relationship with home has been another like repeating theme over the course of this last month, really, especially at the convergence, right? For those of you that this is your first SASS, I'm just I'm freestyling until someone's like, hey, no, I'd like to talk about that. If at any point someone wants to talk about something completely different, you can also be like, hey, all right. And I'll like jump off the soapbox. But go ahead. Silver.
Hi, it's so cool to see like so many different people that I love this idea of opening up the first SASS of the month. It's so awesome. Hi, Chantal. The I was looking right at you, so that's perfect. But yeah, the one of the things that came up was the way that on the same vein as like the inward turn. Um it seems like it's kind of like a taking stock, like it's like settling down, taking stock of all the things that you implemented in the outward times. For me, one of the ways that that manifested was I've been doing a lot of nervous system work for the last couple years, especially. A little before that, but I didn't know what it was at that point, and I've just been like kind of refining that more and more. Um, and I think it was a few weeks ago, I was talking to Ocean, and I was describing how I used to nervous laugh like all the time, like all the time. And then I was like, wow. And then I was trying to remember the last time I did that. And it was actually really hard for me to come up with an instance. Whereas previously, I would have done it like the day before or the week before or something like that, where I would have just uh, been able to pull like a story, a memory of that. And I kind of was searching for it and realizing how much less I do that because I am literally less nervous because of how much nervous system and like how many tools I have now to soothe myself. And so during my outward stuff, I was very busy and there were times where I got overwhelmed, but I knew when it was happening and could go, "Oh, I need a break." Like, "Oh, I need to breathe." And so I had less moments come up where I was just like, haha, I don't know what to say. Like, like that kind of thing where I would do that, quite a bit historically. I feel like I say the word historically a lot. But I did like in my past. And so it was just like a very big like epiphany moment of, oh wow, this is different than it has been for the last couple summers. Or probably every other summer of my life, really. And so as I'm looking forward really to seeing more things and kind of looking over my journal entries and things, maybe like I do video stuff like video journals, and seeing where I was last year. One of the things I love about TikTok is the whole like this, on this day last year, and I'm like, oh wow, I was in a completely different place. Or um look at me having that same thought again at the same time last year, which is also interesting. So yeah, love to hear anybody else's stuff, but also feel free to change subject. Oh, Jen Marie.
I'm on my phone, guys, so you're allowed accommodations. I'm on my phone and I can't get to like the hand raising thing. It's just like confusing. Anyway, oh shoot. I forgot what I was gonna say. Oh man, that sucks. Okay, that's a big old never mind for me. Hold on just a second. What were you just talking about, Silver?
Was it
Nervous.
the having the same things come up at the same time every year?
Mm-mm. Oh,
Sounds
no, I forgot. It's gone. It's gone, Stephanie. You can have the mic.
Just start jumping up and down if it comes back, and I'll pause really quickly, and we'll we'll hand it back to you. As Ezra was speaking, I have a practice where, as I'm journaling, I read my entries from like the year before or whatever, and there are these striking similarities with how I'm feeling, even right down to like if I'm having physical pain at certain times. Like it might present differently, but I have like more times with physical pain on certain times of the year. The benefit of that is that I don't panic anymore, right? Like I don't think my whole life is going to be like this, full of pain, because I am able to see from keeping these records over the years that there is this pattern. And that allows me to treat it differently. Where there's, sorry, I'm covered in mugwort. I'm like distracted. Let me put it out. Okay. It's driving me crazy. But yeah, so having those records really and being able to look back at them really helps me. My Facebook ones, though, I tend to run away from. I'm like, oh my God, what was I doing 10 years ago? It was probably, do I want to know? I'm like, I'm not sure that I want to know. But I wanted to kind of change a little bit and kind of go along with this. Maria, I think you'll love this, the twist this story takes. On my way home from Convergence, that took me 26 hours to get home from the West Coast to the East Coast. So that was a blast, but I was in a really good space to do it, to stay present after Convergence. And it actually wasn't as bad as one would think. But one of the things that I've been working on and letting go is my fear of being seen for my authentic self, and my fear of, sharing with people. Like I always laugh off my witchcraft, ha ha ha, make a joke and make it more palatable for others. And so that was a big thing for me at Convergence, that was on my mind and that I was working on. And leaving Convergence gave me a little more bravery, obviously, because I got on my first flight and a man sat next to me. It was just us two in the 3 seats with the center in between us. And I judged him immediately that we would not align, by his appearance, which was my bad. But on takeoff, I'm not a good flyer, and I was working through all my stuff, and he noticed, and he was obviously struggling too, it turns out he had like PTSD, and and so on, and was working through some flight panic and some migraine stuff. And so he kept trying to chat me up. And so finally he says to me, "What are you reading?" And I was like, "Oh no." Like, I always hate that question. I was reading Southern Gunning. That was a gift for me. Thank you, Ezra, on the plane. So that, it's folklore and witchcraft in the American South. And I sat there for a minute and I was like, well, how am I going to handle this? What am I reading? What am I going to say? Am I going to brush it off, or I'm going to own who I am? And I'm like, you know what? I'm reading this. And I held it up for him, and expecting him to not talk to me maybe the rest of the flight. And he was so great. He was like, "That's so cool. That must be so interesting. Here's what I'm reading." And he holds up he's like, "I'm super into like vampires and witches, and Vampire Diaries is my favorite show." And I was like, "Ah, best friend, new best friend." And we had a lovely flight together. We talked the entire time, about really deep stuff. He'd lost his voice and his wife from COVID, and he had all these things. He was going to see his daughter, and by sharing myself, my authentic self, in that little way, we moved beyond that surface talk, and we really went there. And it was an amazing experience. And had I not shared that, it wouldn't have happened. So that is what I'm going to continue to work on, because I just felt like that was such really great feedback for like my first foray out into doing that. And I made a great Vampire Diaries friend on the way too. Maria, I think your hand was up next.
Thanks. Jen Marie, I saw you doing your go. Okay, are you sure? I saw you write it down too, so just great job on writing it down. So I just wanted to like weigh in kind of on that, of like more too of like that the synchronicities and stuff, if that's okay, Stephanie. Um, so like I just love that, and it's such like a great reminder. And I had kind of a similar experience, kind of with asking, kind of putting out there what my intention was and then having things happen. It's just like kind of that reminder for me of that we state these intentions and then like see how the universe shows it to us, but we don't always get to choose like how that presents or like when it happens. And sometimes like you having that flight, those mishaps could have been, seen as like a why is this happening to me? And like this is horrible. And, then not been open to like talking to that man. But like you were kind of releasing something and looking to like, set intentions around like showing up authentically. So the universe was like, okay, well, we need to rewrite her plane to get her on this flight to sit her next to this guy. So you can have that moment, right? You're never going to forget that. You're never going to forget that moment, right? You're never going to forget sitting on the plane after the convergence next to this man talking about that. And now when like you're having that danger of like, oh, like I'm afraid of showing my authenticity, now your brain has this data of like, remember that time I was on the plane and that gentleman like, was next to me and he was so excited about my book and Vampire Diaries. It's like, and now, you like have that. So I just love that. And like, and I was kind of um releasing, I find safety in control, like being able to control my environment, and I've been like engaging with that process for a long time, like my relationship with that. But during like the convergence times, it was more of that like perfectionism, like these bits that are still like clinging and holding on. And then I had just like so many random accidents happen. Like I got shit in my eye, like things just kept happening that like I would have perceived as like you know, like going wrong. But then I was just laughing because I'm like, okay, like this is just me engaging with like things not going perfectly or what my perception is of them going perfectly. And like, how do you want to interact with that? Like you like said this is the experience that you were looking for, right? But like I don't necessarily get to choose like how it was going to show up. And like it happened enough where I was like, okay, I get it. Like, okay, like these like just these things that were happening that don't usually happen. And also just I got the ping about it, right? Like then internally, like it was just like a moment. It nobody would have even noticed it, but like internally, like I felt like that it just felt highlighted. And I was like, okay, like this is just this journey of kind of, you know, the layers of shadow work and whatever, I don't know, whatever layer it's on, here we are. And so and also um like doing things in community, when we release and when we manifest, I think for those of us that have been like working in different communities, it happens a lot faster too. So like, you know, it can happen like, I mean, you know, almost immediately to like start to have these experiences. And I mean, of course they do on your own as well, but just like when you're kind of, I find in community things tend to manifest themselves a little bit quicker. Yes, thank you. Woohoo, Coral, over to you.
I so resonated with what Stephanie was talking about. I on my flight into my hometown, so it was like a smaller flight, and I ended up sitting next to this woman, and we like told each other our whole life stories. Like, oh, hi, nice to meet you. Here's all the things. And but I told her I'm a witch. Like she was asking me where I was and like where I was coming back from. And I was like, oh yeah, I was in Oregon with a bunch of witches, like as one does. And so it was kind of like a little vulnerable because like she then knew like my business and that I'm a local and like all these things, and then I admitted like to her that I'm a witch, and then like obviously anybody sitting around us who might have overheard this conversation also heard this. And so I was like, like, I don't know, it felt scary, but she didn't react poorly. Like, she was just like, oh, you've led a very interesting life. And I don't know, she wanted to like stay in touch with me and get to know me more. So I was like, I think that's a good sign. So, but yeah, I'm with you, Stephanie, on the vulnerability and being open about who we really are. And I don't know. I'm glad it worked out for both of us this round. Ezra Silver.
Thank you. I love that story so much. And I love the parallels with Coral's story as well. It feels like um there's a little bit of like the taboo around the word witchcraft, like break, like cup, like breaking. I don't know why the word break. I was like, there's a better word for that, but whatever, it's breaking. And so the I really love that story. And I love too that it let like um so that book that I gave Stephanie as a gift, like it was I actually got 3 of them by accident. Like I paid for one of them and they sent me 3 of them. And they told me to keep them. And so I was like, oh, I'm gonna bring them to the convergence so that I can just like intuitively give 2 of them away. And so I did, and I love that that led to a conversation. That's so cool. That makes me feel like I was like part of that story. That's so cute. And I love when like there are so many different people that I notice that are so they're so witchy. And they love like they'll just surprise you about something. And like I went to yesterday this like breath work thing that was very cool. It was like a class, but it wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't quite a class. He did have like lecture portion where he was explaining like the science and stuff behind breath work, but it was like everybody brought yoga mats and blankets and pillows and stuff, and we all laid in this auditorium, and then he played music and then just audibly breathed in a rhythm, and like it was so powerful, and like everyone in that room, like in my town in Jacksonville, Florida, there was like 200 people in this room that were doing this all together. And I was like, I wasn't sure what the turnout was going to be, and he'd even mentioned that, like, you know, especially like in the South, sometimes people think that it's like a demonic thing that he's doing. And he is like this guy from Belarus, and he was like my teacher who works with both the light and the shadow. Like like that kind of, I was like, he was like, I'm gonna open the ceremony and I'm gonna close the ceremony. Like I was like, dude, like what? I just did this like mass ritual with a bunch of people, you know, here, and it was so cool. I loved it so much. And I did like meet people in the line and like overheard conversations of people that, you know, like the yoga people that were there, and and the Christian people that were like, I saw Jesus when I was breathing, you know, like that kind of thing. It was very cute, and just, I don't know, I love it so much. It's like people actually like light up when they talk about magic. It's very cool. Yeah, that's it. Go ahead, Stephanie.
I have been to a bunch of breathwork classes, and it's very much like that. And they're awesome. Like they really can be life changing and releasing a lot of stuff, which is interesting. But I was having these thoughts this morning, as we do, think about things all day, and then we show up to SASS and they happen to come up like all the time. About how so many people who practice their spirituality in different ways um so aligned with witchcraft, but for some reason witchcraft, well, not for some reason, because of history, gets the bad rap, you know, whereas it's acceptable to do it at a breathwork or a yoga or a Catholic church, right? Which when I'm sitting in a service in certain religions, I'm like, geez, you know, this is witchcraft. Um, it's just the name has been vilified, and I'm wondering if, as we see all these witches that are, you know, being called up and coming in, if that's starting to change, you know. And I'm like, gosh, are we? Is it becoming more mainstreamed, if you will? Like, is it growing? And I'm hoping it is. I'm excited about that. But is that part of my work, right? Part of accepting myself as a witch and being being who I am authentically in my daily life outside of my witchcraft circles, helping to create a safer space and a deeper understanding of what witchcraft actually is in these communities that are already really so aligned with the witchcraft that they don't even know it. Like, I'm not even sure what I just said, and I'm lost. So I'm going to mute now because I think that I said everything that I had to say.
Yeah, I had the same like notion like of when I was building the altar at the Convergence, like we Ocean and I collaborated on an altar. And that was just so fun. It feels like it's just like, and I've seen, and we went into other like to witchy shops and stuff like that, and they would just have altars as the like decor, right? And I was like, I could, as I was doing this, I could see, like, I don't know if how many people are like have ever been to like a nerdy convention, like for with cosplay and that kind of stuff. And I've been going to them since I was like 16. And I remember when I was 16 doing it, you know, like 16 years ago, there was, you know, maybe 100 people in my town that would be there, right? And you had to like go, it wasn't even my town, it was like the next town over, right? And then over not even 16 years, like now there are conventions that are being held multiple times a year that have 20,000 people going to them. and that kind of thing, you know, like where it's like being a nerd or like, you know, somebody that was like really into Star Trek or Star Wars or something like that, that was extremely taboo at some point. And people, you know, got her, you know, like bullied for it and teased for it, and they had to have their little like, you know, underground D&D groups and stuff like that. And now D&D is like a mainstream like multi-million dollar like platform that people like watch hours of, and there are people that are celebrities that are just D&D people. That's what they're famous for, is like going online and playing D&D and that kind of thing. And I can see witches kind of becoming like, when I was building this altar, I had like a vision of a convention where like, instead of just, I mean, like the artist alley would look like a bunch of altars, and you would like that kind of thing. Like you would go and set that up, and then like people, you know, could leave their offerings or whatever, buy their little mini altars or whatever. And I don't know, I was just like thinking about that, and then as like a transition, you know, transitioning out of hiding type of trajectory, I guess. But yeah. So I'm very excited for it. It's really nice as somebody who, when I entered the Brighton Tart community, I feel like I was mostly observing for like the first year. And you know, I was doing my work, like I still have a like when Stephanie was describing like the neatness of the journal, like being able to look back on past years, I was like, wow, I really like, I really admire that. I am not that consistent with journaling. And the, let's see, but I was still like doing all the prompts and like showing up to meetings and stuff. But I still I couldn't really understand for a little while the secrecy aspect of it. And it makes a lot of, but then, you know, at some point I had, you know, in my research and stuff, like I read several books about the history of, you know, persecution and stuff. And when I was a kid, I was, you know, very interested in that, but I don't think it really hit me until I was among people who identified as witches, and I was feeling that like secrecy and fear type of thing, and I was like, oh, interesting. And it didn't really occur to me until I was in it, how scary that would be. And how, you know, historically we have, you know, like have had to hide ourselves from people. And so it just makes me very excited to see that the need for that, like that the acceptance of the world is coming a little bit closer to people being able to be their authentic self without fear of being persecuted for it. So go ahead, Jen.
Can you lower my hand? So my my gimbal died. That's why I'm like riding sideways right now. This is like my most like biggest special interest, like obsession my whole life. I could go on and on and on and on and on and on and on about what you guys are talking about. As far as like what's been going on in the last 5 years. But one thing to remember too is that, you know, from the perspective of like someone who has very deeply navigated underground witchcraft spaces for decades, there are existing covens all over the place. And I think that sometimes, like, I don't know, it's because of the secrecy, it's forgotten that there's all these different ways for witches to do like what you're talking, Ezra, of like having those altar spaces and all that. There's so many ways that they're already doing that, and the secrecy really does come from, like, it wasn't even 20 years ago that you could be institutionalized for the rest of your life by coming out as a witch. Like, that was very, very real. And so there's a reason why there is that secrecy. Like, we have been, like, I have personally been institutionalized for, uh, for the ways that I, experience, right, life. It's hard because there's like, I'm trying to use a very broad brush for something that has a lot of details to it and a lot of nuance. But there has been a shift in the last 5 years. Before I went up to Alaska, we still couldn't be super out, right? We were oftentimes referred to ourselves publicly as creatives or artists, right? Because a lot of artists, a lot of performance artists, a lot of like creative people most witches are creative in some way anyway. And so I go up into the Arctic, and all of a sudden there's this like big, I don't know, like the witch's call, right? That big, massive witch's call where a lot of witches were like shaken out of this like illusion of the big Cappy Pappy and finally starting to really question where they fit in all of that. And so there is this, we are in a different world. We're in a world that is receptive, a lot more receptive to, again, allowing us to actually exist. But there's still so much like misinformation and so much influence in like one singular direction in, you know, big witchcraft groups and things like that still. Anyway, we're gonna go ahead. But I could soapbox all day about this topic. It's fascinating.
Specifically using the term witchcraft as a positive term is a recent phenomenon, very recent. Even in 80s, 90s goth culture, if you said you were a witch, then you were like super edgy. Then you were like super dark. And outside of Eurocentric cultures, saying you're a witch still can be a bad thing. You know, historically saying someone is a witch is associating them with only harmful magic. I don't like, that's not exactly the accurate term that I want to use, but that was the first one that came to mind. Ghibli agrees. You know, I did grow up during part of the satanic panic of the 80s, 70s, and 80s. So witchcraft was considered a bad word during that as well. Dungeons and Dragons was going to cause you to like get into witchcraft and become possessed. And Dungeons and Dragons pretty much like saved me from like losing my shit in high school. It, you know, it created my social group and my like little network of friends so that I could like cope with the shitty life of being in a small town and being neurodivergent and not knowing yet that I was a witch. So the recent, you know, American, you know, panic against witches, I've seen it and I understand that. Also, something you frequently see in trans people, it's not a universal experience, but it's something that's seen frequently, is when they're coping with this dichotomy of, you know, accepting their transness, especially when they're dealing in something that they see as a vacuum when they don't have outside support, is, you know, going to polar opposites to kind of prove that they're not what they think they are because they don't have positive supports. In my case, it was to be like hyper masculine, and then at one point it was to be like hyper Christian. When I finally started figuring out my truth, persecution came along with that. Inviting things into my life that I see as my truth now led first to concern, then to like church discipline, and then from church discipline to like ostracization. I can't say that word right now. I know that word. You know, to getting, you know, pushed out. So you know, the ugly stuff still happens. It happens less as the grasp of Christianity kind of weakens. Which is kind of weird for me to say as someone who works with Abrahamic deities. But that's like a whole nother thing. But I guess what I'm saying is this is a process that is recent and evolving, and I want to honor people's experiences across the spectrum of positive and negative, because I know there's been both. I am super, super happy that I can go into a store full of like-minded people and talk openly about my spirituality now. I can like go to a conference and connect with like like-minded people. In my city, there is a pagan convention and there's a pagan pride festival. They're like one of the larger ones in the Midwest. So I'm highly privileged to have that in my area. And so if I say witch, most people are like, oh, that's interesting, or like, oh, that's weird. Very rarely is it like a negative response, or they're scared and they back off. That's a huge change from the 90s. So I'm really happy for that. And I'm going to guess that Isabel's next.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Morgana. Yeah, this whole topic, I find it so fascinating and exciting. And as I was listening to Stephanie, I was thinking of my own experiences that I've had when I traveled. And I no longer had to hide the books that I'm reading because I felt confident that if people were going to judge me, they're going to judge me regardless for any other thing. But I remembered many years ago using Halloween almost as an excuse to be able to dress up as a witch so that I can feel like, oh, I can get away with doing it during this time because, I'm celebrating. But as time went on, I started feeling that it was kind of like disrespecting who I was because it was not a costume. It was who I've become. But I wouldn't have come into my own, I want to say, for me, without the tools that Bright and Dark has provided in deconstructing, because it starts with us. And so for me, I'm able to hold my own and not feel apologetic about who I want to present myself as. And I feel empowered just by the fact that I don't do it more often than not because I'm always in sportswear. But if I wanted to look witchy on a certain day because I just felt it, or because that's the day I was practicing, that I feel comfortable doing it. And now I can defend my posture by having my persona speak for itself. I don't feel like I have to defend it myself to anyone anymore. But again, it started with the tools, because if it hadn't been for the deconstruction that I've been going through and all the shadow work that I've been doing this past year, I still think that I would have still been hiding. And so, yeah, the growth is incredible. Maybe not, I don't see it like weekly, like there's been growth, but yes, when you look back a year ago or some time ago when I was, hiding, or I remember wanting to walk into a lot of Spanish, they're called, oh my gosh, like where curanderas practice. And I don't remember the name of them, but I've always wanted to go inside of these shops, but always too afraid of who's going to watch me go in there. And so I'll be outed. But now it's so common practice that nobody's judging. And in fact, I thought that the last time I was in LA and I walked into a store and there were some younger women there, very young, like early 20s, and they were giggly and And I said something to them on, I don't remember exactly what it was, but I wanted them to feel empowered, like it was okay. It's okay to be in there. Because I think that we give each other strength, if not by guiding, then by being the light for others. And so that was just my 2 cents, my very 2 long cents. Thank you.
It was just the right length, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, it makes me really happy to see that, and it's reminds me of like one of the concepts, like, so I have like 2 different paths that my brain wants to take right now. But one of them is on topic, so I'll do that one first and see if the other one comes up. Um so I was talking about this with my family. So for anyone that doesn't know, I live in an intergenerational household with my grandma, my mom, me, my partner, and my brother. So we have my brother is Gen X, he's 19, and then like we're like millennial age, and then my grandma is Gen X, or my mom is Gen X, and my grandma is technically silent generation, like the last year of the silent generation, but um so it feels like sometimes I'm like in a condensed like microcosm of those of the generations. And as I get to know them better, and we have a lot of discussions, because a lot of times I'll bring up if not the exact journal prompt, I'll bring up something that came up for me because of the journal prompt, and so then we'll have like discussions. I even talked to them about like the breath work stuff that I was doing, and learned that it's a generational thing, that we don't breathe very like rhythmically in our family. Like my mom and grandma even have like a deviated septum, so they've been like mouth breathing their whole life, and that's been like affecting the way that they breathe. Um and so one of the things that came up was the idea of like scarcity. And I'm sure, like, if you're in these like healing circles, then you hear about like scarcity mindset. And when I learned from my grandma, who was her dad was most of his childhood was in the Great Depression, and she was raised with a Great Depression mindset, and then kind of like carried that into her life. And then my mom kind of like broke that and broke that cycle essentially. Um, and now that we're all in the same house, we're all like learning from each other about that. And the more that I talk to people um, who lived through these like very scarce times, either whether or not it's like financially or safety, like only some people can be safe, other people are institutionalized or killed, or otherwise locked away from sight. um as we're like in a transitional period, um and moving into a world of more abundance and safety, um, and more space for everybody to be their authentic self. Like we're the nervous system work. I feel like that's why my brain is like hyper fixated on that, is because that is how we ease that transition. Because it feels like um, a lot of people who were raised in scarcity, and I'm talking about myself too, because I was raised like very poor, and I didn't even realize it. I thought that was just like status quo. But like um and like moving from place to place and that kind of thing, uh they're like, we're not going to recognize abundance when we see it if we are still in that place, if our body is still in that place. And so a lot of times it's like I've been bringing a lot of the work that I've been doing into, my mom and grandma whenever something gets very scary for them, and kind of bringing it back to, are you safe now? like let's breathe with that. Let's all like let's all hug. Let's get to like do these like practices that that help the nervous system realize where we are now rather than what happened to us, even a few years ago, because like a lot of people during COVID, like that rewired people's brains. Some in some ways in a good way, like some people were like, oh wow, I don't have to go to work every day. That's crazy. What if that was the rest of my life too? And then other people, went through extremely bad times where, they lost, many members of their family and were sick and got long COVID and all that stuff. And in some way, the whole world was affected by this event. And so every time that kind of shift happens, doing the nervous system work is like the transition phase. And I'm glad Morgana brought up being trans, like as a trans and gender fluid person. Like it feels like I exist in so many transitional spaces that's another reason why the nervous system work is so important, because if your body is still living over there when like the proverbial bear was in the room, then it's really hard to get to a space where you can kind of like manifest the world that you want to see in the future. It's hard to believe that things are going to get better than they've ever been if you've have never had that evidence before. And so it feels like that's a very like important work that we do whenever we do shadow work. And for anybody that's like a body worker of any kind, like that, the somatics of this transition is like highly important. Yeah. So like embodiment. I know that Jen Marie and I know we have body workers in here and stuff like that. Like, but the embodiment of the kind of stuff that we're learning is like paramount to getting through this transition, so that we'll see it when we actually get there. So yeah. Okay, that's it. Go ahead, Maria.
Thanks. So I wanted to kind of share some of the things that have been on my mind regarding like this. And I always say I reserve the right to change my perspective at any time, especially when I'm sharing something that I don't have all the information and I'm kind of working it out, but I'm a verbal processor too. And so as much as I am in my brain talking about it, saying what I'm going to say helps. And so here we go. I'm going to get on a little bit of a soapbox. I think I'm not, so we'll see where this goes. So what this is kind of bringing up for me is this time that we're feeling, this energy, if it wasn't aligned, right, it wouldn't like be happening. And so like this time in our life, in this history is highlighted, right, where we're feeling this. But I wanted to talk about kind of the energetics a little bit, and like where I'm kind of feeling about when there's been sort of uprisings or like rebellions and things like that. We get into the like us versus them, and which is completely understandable. And so all perspectives are valid. All perspectives are valid. So that's a valid perspective of like us versus them. And we talk about the cappy pappy, which is capitalism and the patriarchy, for those of you that are new to those words, but that's what we mean by the cappy pappy. So, and but like so if I'm in this kind of energetics, if I'm in this space of I'm against them or us versus them, that's what's going to happen, right? It's like the battle. But I'm not interested in the battle, although uh have been. And I'm interested in connection, and I'm interested in spaces where the collective can provide a space where people feel safe. And I think getting into the energetics of the battle can be problematic. And I understand too, some things I'm saying is pokey, and I wouldn't wasn't always in this place where I feel this way. It definitely, like, the deconstruction process has helped. And a lot of witchy spaces haven't done deconstruction either. And so sometimes it's just more of the same, right? Like being in groups where it's very controlled based and things like that. And I'm not interested in that. Those of you that have known me for a while or haven't known me, like, I'm very resistant to being controlled or told what to do. But it's my connection with y'all is is different, right? Like when in this place of like connection and love and having this like mutual support, um is why that's different, right? It's why I don't mind. It's why if y'all, one of y'all told me what to do, I probably wouldn't care. Right? Because it's the relationship, it's like the connection and that like support. Um and so like what do we do, right? Because we know like that um we are like in this world, right now, existing in this time and like what's going on. And so how do I be this way in this space? And one of that is yes, just showing up and in spaces where you feel safe to like let others know, because to like, create that community. And then being able to share like in spaces like this is so, it's so important. It's like it's like the most, because when you know you're not alone, you can do anything, I think. When you know you're not alone, when you know that you have people that do support you, I feel like that's so magical, and that's where this like fire, this spark can like really ignite. And um so that's like so highlighted. But like, you know, I'm just kind of shifting this like, right. And I mean, I know Princess Leia is just like keeps coming up, like that, rebel, like there's a part of me that feels so aligned with that, right? But it's problematic, right? Where there's like light and dark, and there's like that light is good and dark is bad, and there's morality kind of attached to that. Because we put the morality on those things. That morality isn't on, not attached to those things, really, right? We put it, we put it there, humans. Um, so I'm like, well, should I be running for Congress? Like, is that how, you know what I mean? Like, like we need witches in Congress. Like, that's where I'm kind of, this is like what I'm mulling over. It's like, so we can talk about, realizing that how we've been affected by the way the structure is, and also ways that the structure has benefited us, right? Like, it's both. But like, so what is it, where we are, I do believe in like the oneness, that like we're all connected, but certainly don't like agree, you know, um, with everyone. And that is, I think, so important too, is like to kind of that art of like, and that comes, I think, from like doing deconstruction and knowing that you do have support, but like being in places where you you're not going to like agree or feel aligned, but I can still feel like I can like communicate, if that makes sense. And so, and getting to maybe a point in deconstruction, like, and for myself, where someone can disagree with me and I don't feel, maybe rejected, but know that, that my perspective is completely valid and theirs is too. But that I'm not aligned with that. And so like I'm finding my way in where I am aligned. Um, but yeah, like as everyone was talking, I'm like, well, we just need witches in Congress. So like that's like what I'm, and that's where like I hope that this goes to, because um, that's just where I think I kind of can see, and then being able to like make shifts. It's like all these possibilities are kind of like in front of us. And I think another reason why it's so important, if you feel called to like be a bit more kind of public, even if it's just within like a conversation, is because everyone thinks sometimes that like, oh, like maybe I'm the only way that thinks this way, or like I'm, there aren't people like me. And that social conditioning is so strong, like, because I think ultimately many of the humans that I've talked to, including myself, especially in childhood, teenage, young adults, like we want to be accepted. You want to be accepted, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's part of, I feel like, the humanness, right? Is kind of that acceptance. And so when like the collective is like, oh, this is the way you do things, and this is the way, this is like the right way, and this is like how you get a gold star, and this is, where this is like how to be good, like there's a part of us that all kind of like want that, but then realizing that, oh, like that collective is, it's actually like not aligned. Um, and then as we're talking about like feeling that's shifting, right? I mean, and Ezra, like you mentioned the generations, and for me, like, I feel this way about a lot of things. I feel this way about, kind of like the generations, um, deities. Um, I feel this way about, Ocean talks a lot about the, like your sun sign, um, of it being more of a way to like get information. Like I was born here, I was born 1981. So this is kind of how this is what socially was going on. And that's kind of how it maybe informed my socialization and my construction. But it's just like a way to give information. Like some people hold so hard and fast of like, I'm a Pisces, I'm, an elder millennial Pisces, and this is how I'm supposed to act, right? And so, but really like, and like with deity work and stuff, it's like all about archetypes for me, right? Like, and that just kind of resonates, and that's something I need to think about more. But it's just kind of these ways in which we like get information, but people hold so strong and fast onto like that being part of their identity. But is it really like, who are you, right? Like, you know, Rafiki, is it like, right? Like, who are you? And then having the, right, like, we haven't always felt safe to be able to like explore who you are. And that's like something else that is shifting, because like we're all here. So in on some level and energetically, we're all connecting, we're all aligned to be in the space with each other. And so there is that being safe to be able to do that, which is awesome. But yeah, but it's like, we often kind of talk about, the cappy pappy, and like I feel like sometimes the conversations can get into us against them, but it's like, but what do we do? What actionable item like can we take, right? Because all we have is now in the present time. That's all we have. Like in this moment. This moment is the most important moment right now because it's the one that's happening. And so, what do we do? And so I'm like, yeah, like I'm just excited. Like I'm just seeing like I don't know, witches for Congress, like I said, and I just feel like that's great. So I don't know. That's all. I feel like my thoughts are coming to a close. Appreciate any weigh-ins. Um, and thanks for like listening to me. I appreciate it.
Okay, I'm
Feels
writing
like,
them
oh
down.
yeah, go ahead, Ezra. I was like, feels like a good time to take a deep breath. Like anytime, it's like, it's just all
We can
like,
also
take a
take
deep
a
breath.
deep breath.
Yeah, go for it, Ezra.
Whenever I've been taking it as a sign when I hear certain, like, people say things, like if someone says the word water, I take a drink of water, like that kind of thing. So the fact that you said deep breath, I was like, okay, I should take a deep breath. I'm glad that you brought up um the valid thing and the political party thing. I think that's really cool because I think, you know, we're definitely going to be moving away from the two-party system, and it feels like you know, eventually once we get like ranked voting, the everyone should have a say in the spaces that are public, that are like shared spaces, and as like, you know, um witches become a more open group, like who have their own, like, you know, rights. That sounds terrible, but you know, like, you know, it's, you know what I mean. But it makes sense that there would be different groups of people, and like you said, I've been doing the practice of validating um pretty much everything that is possible for me to validate. And then the things that highlights the things that my brain is just like, no, this is not valid under any circumstances. And then I'm just using that as like contrast. I often will see that my mom tells a story about like when she got like pulled in the undertow when she was a kid and she didn't know which way was up, and eventually her like um her hands touched the bottom and she could push up off of that. And that's pretty much how my mind sees something that I just like am not going to ever consider valid, is something to push off of, to send me in the direction of what where I actually want to go. Um because and then where everything else, there's like a couple of different interpretations of this. The other path that I wanted to go on earlier was my studies on Kabbalah, because someone brought up, you know, like this, or I think it was Morgana, like the satanic panic and stuff, and the interpretation of the Satan, which is like Hebrew for the adversary, or, and you know, then we changed to like Satan. Um, that is essentially just the adversary or our opponent, or like the sometimes even just called resistance. um and then we push off of that in order to go where we actually want to go, but it can be very confusing when we're not doing our shadow work, because things get mucked up, because sometimes it can even be when I was talking about this with my mom and grandma, I was like, the voice sometimes in your head isn't telling you to do evil things like the resistance or the adversary. It's saying it's just something that isn't aligned with you. And so that could even be like for people pleasers. Oh, you've got to help this person. Oh, you've got to help this person. You've got to help. If you don't help, you're a terrible person. You have to help. Like that kind of thing. That could even be like perceived as, you know, an egoic or adversarial way of being that isn't actually aligned with where you want to go. Um, and what trying to make everything valid as much as possible has like brought up is the idea of um, what you resist persists. And that is also, I've heard that framed as when you damn something, you actually keep it around. Like it keeps knocking at the door. When you validate it, then it's kind of like, oh, it calms down a little bit. Like, it's not that it's not there anymore, but it's not always knocking at the door, because most, as like our, like as aspects of our psyche, like it just wants attention, essentially. And when you say like, hey, it's valid that you want to help that person, like it's valid that, or it's also valid that that person is going through what they're going through. Like, it's valid, that um that their exact experience, is a valid place to be, and that by trying to like fix it, like I'm going to go over there and fix it for them, um is actually drawing me off of my path to go do something like for someone else, which is also kind of inherently hierarchical, because it kind of like puts me in a place of like, I'm the fixer and you're the one that needs help being fixed, and all that stuff. So which is it's a hard balance, especially as you become more confident in your practice. You're like, oh my gosh, like I've got to share this, right? And then you have to kind of keep checking yourself in order to, like, I'm talking to me, but I hope other people can also resonate, because that's the kind of group of people we're in. We're people that resonate with those terms: people pleaser, fixer, healer, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think that was the end of my thought train. So go ahead, Maria.
Yes, I love that. Um, I also felt kind of high called to kind of say this at when I tell someone that I'm a witch, I also realize that they have no fucking idea what that means, right? They have zero idea what that means, how I witch. They don't know how I witch, right? Like how I practice. I mean, and so, I just recognize that, and I just kind of recognize that, there are people that still believe that the witch trials was about witches, like where the witch trials, was about um, murdering humans, mostly women and men. And that, like, so there's some like history that might inform choices, and some stories that have been told in not accurately. And Hollywood informs a lot of what people think about witchcraft, right? And that's like super highlighted for me. Now, I'm a lover of film and theater and all of that. And, you know, that archetype of a witch, like, I love that, but also realize that like I'm a witch, like in 2024, like living my life, and that's also like valid. And I'm here, we're here, right? And so realizing that when I say that, people have no idea really what that means, and that witch is like this really, 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 really broad term. Um, there's lots of specific traditions, that people may practice under. And then there's solo practitioners. And then, like I mean, when what was coming up for me, it's like, well, when you start talking to the trees, and that's how you're informed, like the world shifts, right? And so it's like, like I get my information from other people, but I'm also like leaning in a different way to where, yeah, like sometimes I'm getting my information from the trees, and I'm like, really, you know, focusing on my relationship with like the elements, and that, and here, and you know, everyone, what we call giftings, right? Everyone, I believe that every human has giftings in a way. Um, and it's just like, what I think is so exciting is like recognizing that we're all like so unique, and the way we interact with those giftings is unique, and like being able to explore that, um I just think is awesome. Anyways, that's going off going off on a different road. But yes, it was mostly just that about like, when I say that, just recognizing that people don't know what that means, and witchcraft is such a broad term, and that, at Bright and Dark, we're not informing or practicing any one tradition. Like all practices are welcome. Um, and so it's kind of, but we are like approaching it from like where we're integrating the shadow work as witches, and like looking at things from more of a deconstructed place. And that's why we're able to have these conversations for 2 hours that could probably go on for 10 hours. And we're all able to share, and that's all aligned for us, right? And so like, I mean, there's been a couple times where things maybe have got intense, like over the 3 years, but very, very, very few times that's happened, right? So anyhow, and Ezra, I just love kind of, what you said, and um, it's like, so, what do I do? Like, I am a witch now in this time. Um, I've been doing my shadow work, been seeking out, supports when I need it in various ways. Um, I don't limit any tools that are available to me. So like, um, all of the things, right? Eastern medicine, what's considered Western medicine, what's considered witchcraft. I'm here like for all of it, and to like feel which path like aligns, but I'm not interested in like taking one path that's already been prescribed. Like, I'm gonna take all the information, see what resonates, leave what doesn't, and then I'm gonna keep following my next highest excitement, even if it's just a little more exciting, right? I'm not one, very few times do I get these like big, there have been times where I get these big messages, and I know in my bones that like this is my truth, right? But that doesn't happen all the time. Mostly it's just these little pings of like, this just feels a little bit more exciting than this does. So let the universe know that, yes, please, more of this, right? And like, this is like that. It maybe is not exactly what I'm looking for, but it's closer to that. Because I feel like that's just seems to be where things are at now. So thank you. Very Checkers Malone. Off over to you. Hello. And is this your first? Welcome. If this is your first meeting, I think that it is. Hello. We're happy to have you here.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me? Yes, this is my first time sharing. And I just wanted to share, and so people could get to know me, and I'm enjoying hearing all your stories. I grew up in a super religious home. When I was very little, I would dare to say practicing a form of witchcraft. I was feeling the trees, feeling the energy, feeling called to the trees, and feeling like I needed to touch them and hold them, and playing with energy, and communicating. And then as I got older, I realized, oh, that's bad. That's satanic, because of my religious upbringing. So I stopped. I tried to block that out. At one point, I was a nun for a few years, and I always kept feeling called back to what felt like that original spiritual practice for me. And probably about a year ago, I started having a practice again, and I was really longing for a group like this, but there's so much. I don't want to be negative, but like trendy witchcraft things floating around that didn't feel right or authentic, or just didn't feel like a good fit for me. So I definitely, the more I'm diving into my practice, I've had some pretty intense moments that just almost scared me. And I think that it's just the hard programming that I received from my religious upbringing that I'm deconstructing and working through and clearing out. But it's been wonderful, and I'm really enjoying this group, and just mainly wanted
I think you can go, Stephanie.
I just wanted to say, welcome, Checkers. It's nice to hear from you. I think I may have seen you in here before because I love your hair. It's such a great color, and absolutely everything you said really resonated with me. I was raised in the same situation, and this group has helped me work through that fear-based stuff that I was finding online. That like I knew this was the path for me, but it was too scary. There were so many things that I was going to do wrong, and I was going to, invite all these things, these terrible, terrible things in, and that I couldn't control. Everything was super fear-based, and so. Um, Foundations changed all that for me to be able to like break that down and see that what it's truly for. And I still work through it all the time, like as the guild's doing ancestor work this month, and it's still there's still those scary programmed voices in my ear that something is terrible and scary is going to happen that I'm not going to be able to manage. And this group helped me to deconstruct that. So that's all. I really didn't have anything to add or chime in on. I just wanted to say that, yeah, I totally resonated with absolutely everything that you said.
And I'll jump on another soapbox. Just seems like a good time to do that. So, um, and a lot of witches come through wanting to like to get more involved in like help, and like you're already helping, like sharing here, and even just any witch or any person that you come across that you felt safe enough to talk to about it, like that's the biggest way to like support the community. It doesn't mean you got to like put a sign like out there like join bright and dark, like it's in whatever way that is aligned. And um but just engaging in the app space to, because just like in here, like Checkers shared and a lot of people like resonated with what you said, and that's like what happens, right? Like you never know like what you're I know that each of us have something to share that is going to resonate, and sometimes that thing resonates really deeply with someone, and that's how we support each other and help each other, and no, like on like the business side of things, and that will continue to grow. But this connecting and sharing is the biggest way, will always be the biggest way in which everybody can help. So I just want to say that too. Thank you.
Go ahead, Virginia.
It's more to talk about a subject than to say my point on it. I'm French, I live in France, so you're gonna have to be okay with my English. It's about what Jean-Marie said at the start about the way she had to move to Alaska, then to I forgot the name, and she had to go through a big change, and I myself, I just not really just. It's been a year. I'm in my own place. Before I was with my parents, and like she said, it's a lot of things, and it's a way you do with your time, with going to place. I was curious about you I guess you went through things like that, so I was curious about how you managed it and finished. How how do I took off the hand? Ah, yes.
I want to make sure that. So were you asking me a direct question about how I managed the transition from Alaska to here, or the journey, my whole like Alaskan journey and then coming back?
I'm not sure. In fact, since you went, you had one journey and you're going through one new one. It was a question for you and also a question for the others. In fact, you first, since you were the first to talk about it, I say.
Yeah, that's a really great question. Um, I I almost feel like I need to first say that the way that I managed this transition from Alaska to Oregon, like this big choice of making a drastic life change and really like starting over in a lot of ways. The amount of shadow work and reintegration work and the work that I've done on my relationship with my life and things like this occurring, that has been a game changer in this process, and allowing myself to feel the emotions that come up and recognize where they came from and what beliefs that what I was believing that was creating this emotional reaction. I saw this experience and still see this experience as a gold mine for, or a treasure trove of not only opportunities for continued growth. I was able to see places that still need healing. I was able to see beliefs that I still carried that I didn't know, I didn't realize I was still operating and engaging with my life from a belief that I don't really actually believe anymore, right? I don't know that to be true, but I'm still like my base operating system is functioning on old processes, and so I was able to identify a lot of those. And so the key to this and being able to collect this like really accurate data was me being objective about the experience as well, and looking at it as this, if this is happening for my growth and expansion, in what ways can I practice showing up in a way that is more aligned with my current beliefs? How can I engage with this big, huge, like catalyst in a way that I'm proud of? And that is that's how I engage with like everything every day. How can I engage with this in a way that I'm proud of, and sticking with that and trying to maintain as much presence as possible, while still, it's a balance and a practice, right? Does that make sense? And it would have been a completely different experience if I didn't have all of the validation and support and encouragement and all of that from this community. And like from trying to think of my connection to the spirit world, right? And my relationship with what I'm here, like what my life purpose is. That my life, I truly don't see my life as happening to me. I don't feel like, you know, if I'm experiencing something, I'm experiencing it. I'm not being attacked. I'm not like um cursed in some way, you know. I am I absolutely sincerely see it as opportunities for growth. And so I guess that is that I really struggled with documenting my experience through video to share with you guys as I was doing that, because it takes so much presence and attention to process emotions that deep, and to process catalyst that is so pokey, old wounds being poked in this kind of like big change. So I chose to I chose to prioritize my system and the processing of the experience over documenting the experience this time, because it really did take a lot. And I did do a lot of documenting, but go ahead, Ocean.
Just on the note of transitions, I was thinking about my transition from the autumnal convergence to home and how that's been going the past couple of days. It was kind of difficult for me to leave the house. Maria and I actually ended up going back for a minute since we were still staying in the area, because I left some board games at the house. And the the house cleaner was there. She was very sweet. And she told us we could hang around as long as we wanted to. So we went and said like another little goodbye to the river. And I like went and sat in my favorite little, there's like a little swing there. So I went and sat there for a few minutes. Um, and I was like, yeah, Linda's the best. Totally. Go, Linda. She seriously is like, I don't know how to explain it, but Linda's amazing. There's a witch who cleans the autumnal convergence house, and she doesn't even know it, or she might, I don't know. But uh sorry, I saw Wit's comment and I just got excited. So she said, but when she said you guys can hang around as long as you want, I like felt this pang in my heart. I was like, I just want to stay here. But I didn't, like, it wasn't like this desperate feeling or anything like you might imagine, or like I maybe would used to feel if I were to like be in that situation, because I've like made peace with the fact that like moments in time cannot be held on to, even if you are like holding on to the space that you're in, or if you're like constantly trying to go back to like the same place and make it feel the same. And that's like the main like thing also that I've taken away from the autumnal convergence is like it's never ever going to be the same each year. And that's like a really beautiful part of it. That it evolves, and the people that show up in the space are creating the space. And so for me, it felt a little bit like I've never been to a family reunion, and I'm not really on good terms with my family. But for me, that's what I might imagine like having to leave a family reunion feels like. Um, it was a space where I could be my authentic self and uh, participate as I was excited about participating, and not participate how I was excited about not participating. And so transitioning back home where I feel like I have more responsibilities, I'm going through a slow and conscious uncoupling process, where uh, my friend and I are still trying to support each other, while also separating from any romantic relationship that we had. And so it's a little bit more I don't what's a good word for it? It's a little bit more like I'm the only witch in the space again. And instead of being in a space that's full of witchiness. And so I still have these like mundane fears of like, if I don't do this, then this, or if I'm not like I was so excited to be on this trip that my routine was so easy for me to like maintain, like brushing my teeth and washing my face and taking my meds. And I got home and like, yes, I was tired from the like trip and everything, but also um it was realizing it was like coming back and transitioning into my home is more of an internal space now than reflected in my outer world, which is totally okay. Like that's fine. Cause like we talk about the contrast of like when we're experiencing a reality that we don't prefer, it's not a bad thing because it just gives us more information in order to build a tomorrow that is more aligned with us. And so I'm definitely using my tools, the compassion, and I'm reaching out to supportive witches as I need to, as the dark waves sort of like flow, which they just tend to do sometimes, and I think that's okay. Uh, and also it's helping me to be more specific about asking for my needs to be met or asking for what I need and then accepting what the other person has to say, even if it doesn't meet my need, then it's like confirmation that my need needs to be met by me or in another way, or at another time. And um, it's hard going from a space where everybody's so supportive and wanting to like work together into a space where I feel a little bit more pressure to um, take responsibility myself for the space and how things run and get done. And I know a lot of us feel that, being, especially those of us who are like, you know, going back to being the head of the family or the main caregiver and stuff like that. It's like we get sort of like socially pushed into these roles of like that like I have to do all these things because I know about them and nobody else will do them correctly. And it's a lot of pressure that we take on when we come back to our families and our homes and stuff. And just as a last little note, I guess because I didn't realize I took up the last 10 minutes, but um, it's okay that things aren't getting done if you feel comfortable with that. And it is also okay to ask for support and let that support be enough because it's more work to try and control things to perfection than it is to say that's good enough and do some shadow work on your perfectionism for a minute. So yeah, we have 5 more minutes if anybody would like to say anything else or chime in, but I'll go ahead and actually I would like to take a deep breath. I did that earlier with you guys too, and it felt really good. So thank you.
Also, Ochin and I met this really awesome massage therapist, and they reminded me to just kind of, as we've been all on our computers or our phones, just take a moment and stretch out that chest area, just kind of open up a little bit. Maybe if you've been leaning forward, maybe just as comfortable as it is, just kind of do a little stretch there. We've all been for 2 hours intently on our screen, so just I'm gonna be mindful, incorporate that a couple times a day. Yay. Thank you.
I love that. I'm totally at the end of like meetings gonna start pointing that out. Like if you need to stretch, and I will go sometimes sit under my tree and I reach my hands up as if I'm trying to reach the top of the tree, like with my fingertips, and it helps me like stretch and ground at the same time.
I also just took my vitamins and I'm gonna get some water if anyone else needs that.
Thank you. I need to take my vitamins. That does help.
And go pee too. Do all those things.
That is so important. I was literally telling someone at the autumnal convergence. I was telling a few people, but the whole point of life is to eat, sleep, drink, poop, and pee. So there's your little nugget of wisdom, pun intended.
We stay basic.
Bye,
Okay,
everyone.
bye. Have a good Sunday. Thanks for hanging out with us. See you in the app.